Hey everyone, this is Eddie's Reptiles, and today we're going to be talking about the things you need to know before buying Emerald Tree Skinks, and maybe a few things that you didn't already know, so let's jump right into it. Let me just preface in the beginning of this video that I absolutely love Emerald Tree Skinks. They have a few colonies of them. I also breed them. We have the 36 by 18 by 36 here with a colony. Right beside it, down lower, I don't know how well you can see it, but we have our subadult Emerald Tree Skinks, and then we have another enclosure off to the right here with our baby Emerald Tree Skinks. With that being said, the first point I want to make is Emerald Tree Skinks aren't always going to be what you see in videos. So a lot of the videos out there are showing how inquisitive and curious they are, and they jump out for human interaction. They'll crawl up your arms, over your shoulders, just very inquisitive lizards. And in most cases, I do find this to be true. Many of my Emerald Tree Skinks are exactly what you see in the videos, so I don't want to say none of them are like that. I would say the majority of the ones, at least in my experience that I own, are very inquisitive, very curious, love to jump out. If I open that door right now, probably all 5 of the ones that are in there will jump out and just go crazy. They're a lot of fun. But there are some Emerald Tree Skinks that are the complete opposite. Very shy, very timid, will run away when you come into the room. It'll take quite a bit of work to actually get them to the point where they do want to come out and hang out on your arm. And even when they do, they might jump on your arm, run up your shoulders, and they'll actually take a leap of faith, kind of like a crested gecko will. They'll take a leap of faith and then scurry off into your room, and you gotta go catch it. And I'm only mentioning this to say that if your expectation is that you want an Emerald Tree Skink that is going to be very friendly, that's going to hang out on your shoulder and jump out of its enclosure anytime it sees you, it's going to take quite a bit of work to get them to that point. Sometimes you'll get lucky and they'll just immediately be exactly what you expected it to be, but in a lot of cases they are extremely shy. They will run away from you, they are scared of you, and are not going to portray exactly what you might have seen in the video. Another thing to note is when you are buying Emerald Tree Skinks, I know it's very difficult right now because a lot of the breeders have very long wait lists, which if you are looking to buy Emerald Tree Skinks, I do highly recommend getting on one of those wait lists instead of trying to buy wild caught. I think the only reason you should buy wild caught is if you are a breeder and you plan on breeding them in captivity, just to get a pure bloodline or a different bloodline. So my primary reason for recommending getting on a waitlist as opposed to being wild caught is simply due to what they can come in with when they're wild caught. You could be dealing with parasites, you can be dealing with infections, very high chance of that lizard not making it, as opposed to getting a captive bred where you're going to get a very healthy animal from a reputable breeder. Generally speaking, you may not be able to buy more than 2 Emerald Tree Skinks from one single breeder. They might not have them available. They come in clutches of 2, so generally speaking, they're going to have 2 available at one time. So Emerald Tree Skinks really shouldn't be kept solo. You should have them in a colony. They'll thrive and do better in a colony. The problem is not all colonies will accept a new Emerald Tree Skink. So the best thing to do is raise them together from babies to adults, because introducing adults can be a little bit more difficult. So I see particularly the female Emerald Tree Skinks may not get together very well, but in my personal experience, I've had a male Emerald Tree Skink that was very aggressive toward the 2 females, as being extremely aggressive, and I had to actually separate him from the colony. So just giving you a heads up that there is a possibility if you try to put adults together to colonize, they're not always going to get along. You don't want to be stuck with 5 Emerald Tree Skinks, 2 of them which won't get along with the other 2 or the other 3. Now you got to get another enclosure and another setup going and make sure that they're separated so they can all thrive. So I do highly recommend, if you are going to get a colony and you want to have 5 Emerald Tree Skinks, you have the option or the ability to get 2 from one breeder. You can get 2 from another breeder. They will have to be sexed at some point. Just over a year they hit sexual maturity. The males are easily identifiable by the yellow scales on the back of their hind feet. And you just want to make sure that they are not breeding with their counterpart, their siblings. If you get a clutch from one breeder and you end up with a male and a female, you just want to make sure that they're not breeding. You want to keep healthy bloodlines, mix the bloodlines, make sure that you're pulling from two different genetic pools, just to have the best chance of healthy babies. And that brings us to our next point. Emerald tree skinks are prolific breeders. So if you do have a male and you have females in the tank, most likely you are gonna end up with babies. And they do lay 2 eggs per clutch, and they'll lay them between every 30 days and every 50 to 60 days. I've had some that'll lay them consistently at 30. I've had some that'll lay them consistently at 50 to 55, and even a little bit longer. So if you don't plan on having babies, definitely make sure that you go with all females, or you separate that male once he hits sexual maturity. So moving on to our next topic is feeding emerald tree skinks. So if you're one of the lucky ones that picked up these emerald tree skinks, and they're the very inquisitive, curious creatures that they are, they like to jump out when you open the door, hang out with you. It makes feeding pretty difficult when you just, when you're in a hurry and you just want to get in there, get the food done, and get out. It's almost impossible because every time you open that door, they are lunging and leaping and coming at you every which way. It makes feeding pretty difficult. As absolutely fun as emerald tree skinks are, it can definitely make just typical general maintenance and cleanup a difficult task. Generally, what I have to do when I want to clean out the tank, we do have a bioactive, so we don't have to clean it as often, but we still definitely have to clean it. I actually have to take the emerald tree skinks out and put them in a temporary enclosure while I clean their enclosure, because it would just be impossible to do it while they're in the tank. It's just, they would just be jumping all over me and then jumping off my shoulders into my room. Then I would have to spend 15 minutes trying to catch all of them. So it's just something to take note of. Feeding them is never really a super quick task. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is the actual enclosure themselves. Things that I have noticed while keeping emerald tree skinks is they do become much more friendly and social when that enclosure is up in the air. If their enclosure is on the ground, I see them typically being a lot more shy and timid and running away from me when I get close to the enclosure. But once I raise it up to about eye level, they become completely different lizards. Honestly, I took them from the ground and raised them up, and I think it took 2 hours to just turn a 360 from being shy into jumping out of that enclosure and just running all over my shoulders. It was very surprising and actually blew my mind how quickly the process happened. So regarding the enclosure, they do like a clean space. You want to make sure that the enclosure is always clean, and you also want to give them plenty of space. So like you see, I have mine in the 36 by 18 by 36. Use every square inch of that enclosure. Every square inch of that enclosure is being used by them currently. I would say the bare minimum should be a 36 by 18 by 36 and go up from there. Highly recommend a bioactive enclosure, especially with the humidity requirements of these guys. I do use a fogger as well, and then we also mist a few times a day because you want to keep it consistently at 70% humidity. If you don't go bioactive, it's number one going to be a lot of cleanup, but number two, going to have a little bit of a harder time keeping that humidity up. So what we do is we have about a 3-inch drainage layer, then we have the mesh screen with about 4 inches of substrate. They are a burrowing species. They do like to burrow, especially if they're breeding. They'll burrow and lay their eggs. And that drainage layer is really gonna help maintain the water and the substrate. Being that they do like a 70% humidity and they do need a basking spot of about 92 degrees, it is fairly difficult to get it to coordinate a higher humidity with a higher basking area. The basking area is gonna work drying out the enclosure, and then you're gonna have to work to keep the humidity up, which is why we use a fogger. I usually have the fogger running during the day while the basking light is on, and then I'll shut it off to run every about 2 hours at night, because without the basking light, I keep the room at between 72 and 75 degrees overnight, which is perfectly fine for them. So I don't have the fogger running at night because the humidity naturally is going to stay higher after we mist with the basking light off. However, with the amount that you do need to mist these guys, the drainage layer is absolutely necessary so you don't flood the ground. Not only will it be bad for the Emerald Tree Skinks, but if you have cleanup crew isopods in there as well, you don't want them to be swimming around in the bottom. And with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.